and we were big Oscar Peterson fans at
Oh
that
yeah, of
point.
course.
The trio that was I was Ray Brown, man. I used to play the bass. I was 10 years old with a pipe hanging out because I saw a picture of Ray with a pipe, and this is how how impressionable
That's
kids
amazing.
are.
Sure.
But yeah, and I was into it, and I was trying to sound exactly like him, man.
Yeah.
And I would play his stuff verbatim.
Welcome to episode 124 of the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. What's up, folks? What's going on? I am excited to have Tom Kennedy on the podcast. I've been following Tom since I started playing, and so it's a thrill to have him on the show. I'll speak more about Tom and his new album in just a second. As I mentioned on the last episode, I've been busy doing some things, right? Designing and constructing a stand for the upright bass, working on Jerry Jamont's transcription book, volume 1. As I mentioned, we're going to be kind of embarking on this documentary project. And in addition to all that, I've been doing gigs, right? There's always gigs. Lately, I've been playing this musical at the Assistant League Theater here in Los Angeles. The music director was telling me that the last show he did at the theater, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers played bass on it. And according to the musical director, Flea wanted to be involved in the production to support the youth theater and this youth written and produced play. That's kind of the focus of this theater group. It's all youth written and produced and acted in. And so Flea signed on. I'm not exactly sure what show they were doing. And when I think about Flea, I don't think of Flea as being a member of like a pit orchestra, right? That's not what comes to mind when I think about Flea or his playing. Obviously, I know it's kind of common knowledge in the bass world that Flea was a trumpet player, still is a trumpet player. And as a trumpet player, that was my first instrument. I do not still currently play. But like that's how you learn that instrument, right? Reading is a big part of learning that instrument. That is not necessarily the case for playing bass. Like you don't have to learn to read when you're starting out. Although I really think everybody should. That's a sidebar. But that being said, I don't think of Flea as the bassist who would be in a pit orchestra and reading. And as the musical director told me, kind of throughout the course of the weekend shows, and we got another weekend coming up here, that wasn't really Flea's bag. I was sitting there and reading charts, but as it goes with Flea, he's all about shock value, and Flea never surprises, never disappoints in that area. I was shocked to learn that Flea was playing in a pit orchestra for a musical. And this musical is really fun to be a part of. The theater group is really fun to be a part of, and a lot of these youngsters in the cast and crew are absolutely crushing it. LemurMusic.com. Everything you need for the double bass can be found at LemurMusic.com. Shop their inventory of accessories, bows, basses, sheet music, whatever you need. Also, this just happened. I was down at Lemur last week. They are now carrying Fender electric basses. Most of us are probably familiar with the Fender product line, but Lemur Music, this is a new thing for them, right? They're getting into the electric. They have a wonderful assortment. They have the US stuff. They have some made in Mexico basses. They have some Squires for beginners. There's a lot of great things happening for the electric bass, also down at Lemur Music. LemurMusic.com, everything you need for the double bass.
Hi, this is Jerry Jamont. I want to tell you about my upcoming book of bass transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox, Volume 1. This is a collection of over 15 of my bass lines in standard notation and tablature. They are accurately done here by Ryan Roberts of the Bass Shed Academy. Each transcription is accompanied by a video where I talk about what was happening during the recording session, how I got involved, and how I approached each song. Stop by the BassShedAcademy.org to learn more about my book of transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1, and purchase a signed copy of my memoirs, Make It Happen.
On the show is acoustic and electric bassist Tom Kennedy. Tom Kennedy's musical roots run the acoustic bass, an instrument he started playing at the age of 9 and took to so naturally that within a few years he began playing with internationally known players such as Freddie Hubbard, James Moody, Nat Adderly, Sonny Stitt, and Stan Kenton. At the age of 17, Tom would create a musical alter ego when he began playing the electric bass. He was intrigued by the endless possibilities of the instrument. He began developing his own signature style, best described as deep, soulful grooves merging seamlessly into acrobatic horn-line soloing. Gaining a reputation that soon traveled beyond his native St. Louis, Tom relocated to New York City, where he quickly began to work with a couple groups. Further accolades came through a recording with the guitar great Bill Connors and tours with tenor saxophonist Michael Brecker in the world-renowned jazz fusion group Steps Ahead. Tom became an integral part of modern drummer Hall of Fame Dave Weckl band, a group that toured, composed, and recorded for over 9 years. Tom has a new recording out titled New Start, released on Autumn Hill Records. The album features Dave Weckl, Eric Marienthal, Mike Stern, Randy Brecker, and others. So Tom's PR team sent me a copy of the record, and I was really excited to check it out. And it did not disappoint. It did not disappoint. I listened to all the records and all the albums that are sent to me and make notes right before I do these interviews. And I was really excited to listen to Tom's record, to make notes and do all that. But Tom's record, titled New Start, was one of the few records that I've revisited since. Like, I've had a lot of great folks on the podcast, and they send me a lot of great music. I don't always have the time to put on the record again. Some I do. Some I actually have on vinyl. But Tom's I've revisited several times. I've come back to check it out in my personal time, which there's not a lot of free personal time. I really, really dig this record. I highly recommend checking it out, and it was a thrill to have Tom on the podcast. And here it is. Here's my talk with acoustic and electric bassist Tom Kennedy.
I'm doing all right. Yeah,
Cool.
Just hanging in there.
Yeah. What's on the agenda for today? What are you up to? Just like what's the day in the life?
A day in the life. Well, I'm actually practicing some music. Which is odd because I think by this point I should know everything. I realize that's the furthest thing from the truth. But
Sure.
I'm going out with Lee Ritenour next week.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing some older stuff, and a few of his tunes that I missed through the years. So
Okay.
I'm kind of shedding some stuff. And
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, man. It makes you feel young again.
Yeah, cool.
Great. Yeah.
Man, I do want to talk about this, and this I'll probably edit this part out. But in the press release of your latest record, it said it was your 6th record. In your discography on your website, it's actually your 7th.
I think that would be correct, and don't ask me to name them all.
Well, let me know if these sound accurate. Bases Loaded in 96. Yeah. Basics came out in 2002. Just for the Record, 2012. Just Play, 2013. So we're already at 4. Points of View, 2017. That's 5. Stories in 2020 is 6. And New Start in 2024 is 7.
See?
Okay, just making sure. I didn't want to, throw PR people under the bus or anything, but I read through it, then I went through it. I'm like,
sir.
I went back and I was counting. I'm like, wait a minute, what did I miss? Is that actually a record then? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's better to have more than less, I guess.
Absolutely,
that's good thing.
Absolutely. Man, let's dig into it. Let's talk about it. The record comes out today, actually, right? Today's the kind of official release, the 22nd.
It's supposedly out today. Hopefully all of the digital platforms have it, and if they don't, I'm sure it will be in the day or two, but it's planned to come out today. So hopefully on Spotify, Apple Music, all of that. So
perfect.
Yeah.
What does, now this being your 7th record, what does the title New Start refer to? What's the concept behind that?
It's interesting. The the first all original record that I did was my last record, Stories.
Okay.
And I actually, and not to mention that I did it in a completely different way. I didn't use a keyboard. I did it all, kind of programming through the computer, punching in notes,
Mm-hmm.
in the grid on the computer.
Yeah.
Because I was on the road and there was no way to carry a keyboard around.
Right.
And I started getting these ideas, and it just kind of occurred to me, well, you know what, if I can tap in enough notes to put in a melody,
Mm-hmm.
then I can work on it when I get home, or if I want to put in a drum rhythm or something I'm thinking about rhythmically, or a bass line or something, I can get enough in there that I'm not going to forget
Right.
what I'm trying to, what I was thinking of. Maybe it'll jog my memory. And I started doing that. We were actually driving. We were in China, and we were driving from one city to another. And by the time we got to the next city, I already had like a verse and a chorus,
Oh, okay.
with all of the instruments. I mean,
Oh, wow.
the saxophone, the keyboard, the drums and bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I think I'm onto something here. This is kind of good because I can do this anywhere, And so the writing continued all through that tour. That was with Mike Stern,
Mm-hmm.
and got on the plane. I think I got another song done on the plane.
Okay.
Flying home, and pretty soon Stories was done.
Okay.
And I had actually even started a couple of things that would be on New Start later.
Okay.
So I was so proud of it because I'd always wanted to do other people's music on my records, because I was inspired by things that other artists were doing.
Mm.
And so I would actually, if I was super inspired by a particular song that someone else wrote, I'd want to do it on my record.
Sure.
And I was always in a position, to ask, and most of them are most of the artists are friends, if not old friends of mine.
Sure.
And so I was always able to do that. So it was very convenient. And, and I loved the music. But as I did this, the last project, Stories, I realized that there was a lot of untapped stuff that, that I really hadn't thought about. It's different. It's different when you're writing that way, as opposed to writing with a keyboard and kind of stopping and, making corrections, or, whatever, trying to take it in a different direction. This music kind of like, it kind of guided me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little hard to describe.
Sure.
But because I was able to listen to it, incrementally as it progressed, I was able to just stop and say, okay, where is this going to go next?
Mm-hmm.
And it could have gone in 3 or 4 different ways, but I tried to, it was invention. I mean, and I was also trying to keep everything, sounding musical.
Sure.
Yeah. And a lot of times
good goal.
well, I got to tell you, man, doing that process though, in the early days when I was doing it, I would record something. I think, oh, that's kind of cool. And I'd listen to it the next day and go, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah.
I can't follow that. And then I would try to make sense out of it,
Mm-hmm.
sort it out. And it all started kind of taking shape. So anyway, long explanation to your question.
Oh, good.
But getting to the next record, when I finished Stories, and Dave and I mixed it and it was done, and I was listening to the masters, it suddenly just hit me like, wow, all of that's done. Now I have to do something else.
Mm.
I have to do another one. And it was really very daunting for me thinking about that, because I didn't know if I had it in me.
Yeah.
Reason being is that, again, when I was doing Stories, as I would just kind of work on those songs incrementally, I always felt very lucky when I got to the point where I had like a total song written,
Mm-hmm.
and it made sense to me and it was musical. And I thought, wow, I wonder how many of these I have in me.
Yeah.
And there's just no way to know,
Right.
And so anyway, when I was working on the new one, I remember the first thing out of my mouth was, "Oh man, a new start," you know, and it wasn't a pleasant thought.
Yeah, I was gonna say with
Like,
that kind of tone to it, like, this again.
that's was kind of it, because I
Yeah,
was thinking I'm really excited to try to do it again, but can I?
right.
Can I do it? And I was explaining to someone else the other day. I remember at one point, about a month in, and I had like two or almost three songs kind of worked out. And I said, "Yeah, man, it's amazing." I said, "I didn't think I could do this again, but here it is. It's a new start."
Okay.
And I
Okay.
was really positive. So it became something very positive from
Very
something
cool.
that I didn't, didn't expect really.
Right.
So I thought that was very meaningful as far as the title of the record. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the story of that. You
Okay.
know,
Did
I think,
you oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think that could be interpreted many different ways, but that's the real. That's
Okay.
the real story. I might explain it to someone else differently, but,
Yeah.
but that's the real.
We got it
That's the
here
real.
first. We got the inside scoop here first.
That's
So
right.
the album is 8 tunes long. When and I do want to come back to this, how you spoke about incrementally putting it together, because I think that's important. And I
Mhm.
want to come back to that in a second. But did you have any kind of storyboard in mind? Like, okay, this tune or this record it's only going to be like maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10. Did you write a bunch of material that didn't make the record, but is recorded? Because sometimes that happens. You just write excess. You see what happens in the studio. Like, that one really didn't hit, so we're just gonna leave it on the cutting room floor. Or was it
Uh,
just specifically these 8 that you went in with?
It was, yeah. I mean, I would say more the latter. It
Okay.
was kind of, I had things ready, and here's the thing, that with the incremental way of creating this stuff, I was able to go from sort of, and that's kind of the why I call the first one stories,
Hmm.
was because it was actually a long story that was just broken up into pieces, into little stories,
Okay.
or like little minuets, or whatever you want to call it,
Right. Yeah.
but it felt like it was a story. It was a progression, because creating the songs was such a progression
Sure.
that it just felt like it was all a stream of consciousness.
Hmm.
Is probably the best way to describe it. And I felt the same way on this last one, on New Start. So when I had the music done for um, Stories, was 8 songs, I believe, as well. Yeah, because it came out to like 55 minutes, and I thought, okay, that's an album. That's
Hmm.
that's what I need, and I'm happy with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And and actually, to me, there was one song on Stories that I didn't think really fit into the category of the rest of the music, but I just put it in because I thought this is all part of the story,
Hmm.
or this is what I'm trying to get out there, and this is all, it felt like it fit at the time.
Yeah.
So, I don't really worry about it.
Okay.
It's funny. I've the more I've kind of explored, I've been really into Paul Simon interviews lately, because
Okay.
he's so expressive about the way he composes, and how he really, doesn't isn't so worried about it,
Hmm.
and even worried about the result. And if he feels good about the music, then it goes through, it
Hmm.
passes through. And I think that's right,
Yeah.
you know. And also it kind of gives you an opportunity to put on different hats, you know. Oh boy, sorry about
No
that.
worries. No worries.
um, so yeah, getting back to the hat thing. No, but it does allow you to put on, different personalities, and try
Sure.
and try different things. And it's funny, because a lot of this music too, not to get too off the track, but a lot of this music put me in a different headspace, playing wise too. You know,
Let's go down there. Let's talk about that track. How so? I mean, because I was gonna bring that up actually in a different way, but yeah, let's talk about that. what headspace did it put you in? Let's start there, just for perspective. And then how did that differ from maybe where you thought or how you were initially planned on approaching it?
Well, I don't think it was so much about the way I was planning on approaching it. Although I got to tell you, man, when I finished this music, I sat down and I grabbed the bass and I thought, okay, well, let me play through these things. I realized I couldn't play any of it, because I had composed it and I was thinking from, one thing I will say is that I was thinking from the top down.
Sure.
On these songs, I always seem to kind of gravitate to melodic content first, because that makes it very easy for me to hear the harmonic stuff underneath.
Sure.
If I come up with a bunch of chords, I'm not necessarily going to come up with a great melody.
Right.
And I grew up listening. The Beatles were one of my favorites.
Okay.
And Paul McCartney's melodic sense.
Sure.
There's just nothing like that.
Yeah.
And so, that as a kid, that's, stuff, and not to mention a jazz head too. So, I really think that way, which is interesting because I love the bass, I love the bottom, and I love creating the bottom of the chord,
Right.
and being able to change that bottom and all that too. So it's cool. But writing wise, I just realized that I was in such a different headspace, thinking about the top of the thing, that I realized I wasn't really thinking so much about the bass. The bass was so second nature to be able to come up with parts to put to the bottom of this, all of this mess, and make sense on the bottom, that I really never thought about playing it.
Yeah.
And it was all sequenced with the computer. It was all in Pro Tools, so I had I had this expand sound, this picked bass sound, and that's what I was using, and that sounded good and it worked for the parts. But man, when I tried to play them, okay, maybe I'll change them up a little bit.
Did you have bass line ideas written out, or did you kind of have it sketched out as more of like a lead sheet style with just chords and a melody and a form?
Well, I didn't really sketch out anything, as far as notation, as far as music notation, because it was all, as I said, it was in this grid.
But you didn't write in bass lines, or maybe did you write in some pattern holders, or what did you write into Pro Tools for the bass line?
Oh, I wrote in bass lines verbatim. I mean, when these were demo quality things when I got done with them. Yeah. In fact, when Dave tracked the drums, he tracked with that bass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was the only way I could really put these together, because you can't get guys, I mean, these days it's so difficult to try to get people together.
Yeah, I know. I did a record. I did my record. I don't even know how long ago it was now, but yeah, just getting guys together to rehearse. Like, one of the dudes wasn't even there for a rehearsal. I had to have a ringer at the rehearsal, because the other guy was flying in still. Yeah, I get it. It's difficult.
Yeah, well, you're lucky to get them in the studio at any of them.
Yeah, that was not an easy thing to do.
But one of the things that I did is I had everybody kind of as much as I hate to say it, but I think it was really a good idea. I didn't write any charts for anybody. I sent, and especially the keyboard players, which would have the hardest time with that, but I really wanted them to kind of learn the songs, and especially on number 2 here, what I call Stories 1 and New Start number 2.
Okay.
Because they're my first all original albums.
Yeah.
But Stu Mindeman played keyboard on the second album. An excellent pianist from Chicago, just phenomenal talent. And I just basically gave him the songs, and I said, write your charts and kind of learn this stuff, and and see what you come up with. Because and he had my rough keyboard stuff, which was basically kind of just block chords.
Okay.
It was just kind of covering everything so he could hear all the harmonies.
Yeah.
And all that. And I really think that made the album seem a lot more live and a lot more, like all of us kind of the feeling that we were all in the studio, because
Mhm.
we were kind of all creating on the spot, sort
Right.
of, you
Right.
know. And and it was the same thing with Dave. And Dave's just phenomenal anyway, with coming up with something that you would have never thought of that
Mhm.
fits better than what you thought of.
Yeah.
It's all, it's the company you keep, man. It's a big deal.
That's a big one, man. I do think that we're doing records like that, like doing improvised music records, that the best production decision you can make is your personnel. If you choose,
Absolutely.
if your production decision is hiring the personnel with the right intuition, you don't really have to think about too much, and you can just release to the other cat's intuition, and it's always better. Like, yeah, that's the vibe, but like, man, I didn't think it'd be that cool. You get to be pleasantly surprised, which is great.
Well, that's right. And the cool thing about doing the other cool thing about it is then you can actually be very specific,
Hmm.
because there are parts of the songs that need to be what they were,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly what they were. But all these cats, when we were doing this thing, I mean, I had Randy Brecker, playing on
Mhm.
here, and I was kind of telling him like some things that I want, specific things that I wanted on there that were
Okay.
kind of verbatim,
Yeah.
and people are cool when it comes to recording like that.
Yeah.
It's not so much, it's because it's kind of, I always think of it as it's kind of a forever thing. What goes down is going to be there.
Yeah,
you
that's
know
right.
it's
Mhm.
just, it's never going to change. So you want it a certain way
Sure.
at certain places, and then other places it's like I want to hear the magic of what he does,
Right.
you know and the other thing that's cool is that when I get these tracks back from cats like that, it's done.
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know
Yeah.
like I always say, I send Randy something, I never think twice about it. I'm like, he's going to play some great stuff on here that I would have never thought of,
Sure.
and it's all just going to fit like a glove. you
Yeah.
know it's just
Yeah.
that sensibility. It's that musicality that these guys have.
Did you have the personnel in mind while putting the tunes together, or did the personnel kind of after you know got an idea of what the tune was going to be like, yeah, this person would be great for that, let me call them? Like, were you writing kind of with the performer in mind?
I was not at the beginning.
Okay.
As the things started taking shape, it kind of became obvious because I wasn't even sure when I was putting the melodies down and getting chords and starting to put a rhythm together, what the instrument was going to be.
Hmm.
Especially the lead instrument.
Yeah.
Because it could have been a soprano, it could have been a tenor, it could have been a trumpet. I didn't know what it was going to be. But into it, I mean, as soon as I had maybe an entire verse or an entire chorus for a song, I kind of knew what it was going to be.
Okay.
And then I started hearing people on it, you
Okay.
know, and so it didn't take long. I don't so not initially, but shortly into the process, I was pretty sure who I wanted anyway. You
Okay.
know, if I could get them was a different story, but I,
Right.
but
Right.
I,
Right.
you know,
Right.
but I always hear Dave. Dave and I grew up together. We met when we were 15.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, Dave Weckl and I, and
Yeah.
and we've been great friends ever since, and we've played in zillions of situations together, and so I always think of him, and in fact, the first song that I did on Stories, um, the opening track was the first song I wrote, and I wrote it with him, totally
Okay.
with him, and it was just, I'm lucky that way,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
one of the greatest on the planet, available, and wanting to play together. And
Yeah.
so it's you know, I will just say I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Uh, to circle back about what you were talking about earlier is incrementally putting the tunes together.
Mhm.
Um, when you were, I think that's that word incrementally is a beautiful way of saying it. Because did you find when you would revisit a piece, you were getting something out of it that you wouldn't, like you had a freshness when you came back to it, and the music was telling you it wanted to go in a different direction than the time you had left it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like I said, the time, there were several times when I would, I'd get to a point and I'd think, yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. I add something to it and I'd think, yeah, that's cool. And then I come back the next time, like, what were you thinking, man? This is just like change after change after change and this crazy melody, or it makes no sense, you know. So yeah, so you would come back with a, a fresh perspective and be able to actually listen to it. Because when you're writing something like that, you don't, like, it's not in your head when you shut down,
Right.
and you go away from it for a while, you sort of forget it.
Yeah.
At least I do, and then I would come back to it, and then I would recognize it, but then there would be parts of it that were like, yeah, that really makes no sense.
Right.
So it was a cool way to do it, because then I could just back up and I could either fix what I did, or I could just just take it out and start from a particular point,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and see if that made sense to me,
Right.
you know. And in most cases, I have to say that the majority of the time it did make sense, but it gives you so many options doing it that way. There are just so many different ways a song can go when you can
Sure.
hear the produced thing up to a point. Because I found the easiest way for me to figure out how to continue writing these songs was to totally orchestrate everything
Mm-hmm.
up to a point.
Right.
So I had all the instruments and I had it all sequenced and it sounded like a real band, you
Yeah.
know. And then we'd just get to a point and it would stop.
Oh, right. Right.
But that made it really easy for me to think, okay, how would that continue? And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like when it stopped, you could hear more.
Right.
You could hear the continuation of it. And when I heard something or felt something that I thought, yeah, I think that's the next step, then I would start to put it down,
Mm-hmm.
and just see where that went. But that could change too, because sometimes the chords changed a little bit, or sometimes I'd make a mistake when I was sequencing
Mm.
the chords. But something, and I left a lot of accidents in,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they work better,
Right. Right. Right.
and it took it into an interesting place. So
Sure.
yeah,
Do you write with uh what's the best way to ask this question? With the element of improvisation in mind, in the sense of I want to write really open harmony because there's so many things you can do with it. If you just write kind of an open groove in a vamp or something, like, the improviser can take this in so many directions harmonically. Or write, in a specific rhythmic feel that there's a lot of ways the improviser can interpret that and play with that. Do you write kind of aiming at the improvised journey? Like sometimes you can, I don't know exactly the best way to ask the question, but you could write for the improviser as well as writing for the tune. It
yeah, I
gives you a
totally
lot
get
of
it.
options. Yeah.
It does, yeah. So what I did, that's great. It's like you're reading my mind, because what I did, on a lot of the stuff, and I kind of tried to switch it up, but I would do, like it is so focused on the keyboard and the saxophone because it's a quartet.
Mhm.
So they're going to do the majority of the soloing, or the bulk of the soloing, and of course Dave plays on it a lot, but the two main soloists are the keyboards and the saxophone. So what I try to do is split up what I wanted, like a more open section for somebody, and then a more complex,
Mhm.
kind of to break it up, a more complex harmonic
Okay.
uh, solo
Yeah.
that would eventually, maybe go into a vamp or something, but something that was almost like giant steps,
Sure.
just so it almost felt like it was like a solo, like interlude solo,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like getting, just something to kind of break it up. Like I would use the chords from the bridge,
Right.
for example, and I would repeat those maybe a couple of times and then go on to a vamp thing. And so it was cool because it made the solo build differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's different when like if it's an open vamp from the beginning, you can start out slow and you can rip off a bunch, rip off a lot of fast stuff. And,
Yeah.
you can kind of go any way you want to go. But if you've got these changes coming at you like this,
Yeah, yeah. You have
there's,
to.
there's a real kind of focus in it, and it does put the solo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta color inside the lines. Yeah.
Exactly,
Right.
and you can do that in many different ways, and Jay Oliver did just such a marvelous job on stories, and as I said, Stu Mindeman on New Start. They both just had such a great way of approaching that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and for me, that's really interesting. I would hate to have to play over those changes, to be honest with you. But it is so cool when it goes. I always call it like my Herbie, my little piece of Herbie,
Okay.
Herbie Hancock,
Yeah, 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 for sure.
because it has that vibe, and I
Mm-hmm.
use a lot of sus chords, like and suspended chords, and it still has that open vibe to it.
Sure.
It's a little challenging to play over,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah,
but
connecting a bunch of sus chords isn't, it doesn't have the same voice leading that a progression does.
yeah,
Right.
and not to say that there aren't progressions as well, but it's yeah, it's challenging, but it's still, to me, it still has that open edge for the listener,
Mm-hmm.
at least for me, sitting back and listening to it, it's still got this very airy,
Yeah.
kind of open feel to it. And yeah, it's compositionally that way, but also the way people ended up playing on it,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of, it did puts you in a little bit of a box,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to figure out how to do.
We'll be back right after this.
Right in the middle of the show, features are brought to you by the International Society of Bassists, commonly referred to as ISB. Stop by isbworldoffice.com for everything you need to know about latest news, happening, events, what have you, information on players, albums, all kinds of wonderful things. isbworldoffice.com. Folks, for listeners that have been with me since the early days of the podcast, my guest on episode number 5 was Gary Wicks. Gary Wicks now has a new group titled Is That You? The band Is That You has a new EP out. EP is a collection of 4 cinematic instrumentals with nods to 70s funk, and it also incorporates modern electronic elements. It has this overarching feel of just like throwback Crime Story music. You'll know what I mean when you listen to it, which you absolutely should. EP Split 5 Ways is really killing. I hope you all take a few minutes to check it out. It is on all the major streaming platforms. I will have a link to it in the show notes. Again, the group is titled Is That You? And their debut EP is titled Split 5 Ways. Check it out. Folks, I got to let you know about a new podcast I've been digging on, the Craft Brewed Music Podcast. This podcast presents interviews for serious listeners, drawn from and inspired by boutique craft brewed music discovery app. Some of the world's greatest and off the beaten path musicians discuss their work. Hosted by Craft Brewed Music founder Brian Horner and Craft Brewed Music artist Aaron Stamen. The podcast is produced twice monthly. Subscribe to the show wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts and check out craftbrewedmusic.com.
Excellent, sir.
I mean, you just spoke about using a lot of sus chords, and I was going to ask, have you, in the last 2 records, because those are the 2 of your complete original music, what would you describe as like your kind of fingerprint that you maybe as a through line between the two records in your writing style? Is sus chords being something you just mentioned you like to use a lot of? Is there other elements that you always find yourself after you come up or after the pieces together, like, oh yeah, damn it, I did it again. You know, like there's the thing, it always seems to show up. I know I have it. There's always like a weird mixed meter bar in there for like a random bar of 5 or something, because that's how I think the melody falls the best. There's usually always an odd bar in there. That's my thing. It's just it works out that way, and I'm just like, damn it, I can't just write a tune in 4. What the hell? You know, like I have that's one of mine. So I was wondering if what some of yours might have been when looking back on the collection of the last 2 records.
Well, that's one of mine too.
Okay.
You know, sometimes melodies just fall better if there's a 6/4
Yeah.
bar. Or
just needs like I think just a little breath in there that you have to write into it. So it.
No, I think it's great, and and I do it with rhythms too. Like I drove Dave crazy on one song because it the rhythms change every. There's like a thing that could just be the same rhythm every 2 bars, but it's different every time.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, it works with the melody, but it's it's just challenging, and it seems gratuitous at the when you're playing through it, but when you play it, or you listen to it compositionally, it makes sense.
Sure.
I guess there probably are things like that. None of them bothered me.
Okay.
I mean, I really, writing in this process, when I finally got these things together and they were done, I was really happy with it.
Cool.
Very cool. And it became, it's weird because, it became hard to think about or play other people's music.
Mm.
That was really tough for me to lose to move on to something else.
Yeah.
Because I was so, I felt, I don't know, and it wasn't just about being invested in it or just feeling like I was completely immersed in it, but it was something that I really felt like it took me to a different place, because it really, music for me, I can say that I wrote this music, but it's bigger than me, man.
Sure.
It comes from someplace other than, it's not just me.
Sure.
It's a very spiritual thing, and it's coming from somewhere, and or everywhere, So that was really, and it was really the first time I felt that, that it was just coming from, it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
And there were just forces. There were just things that were coming from a lot of influences through my life, and and those things unknown.
Yeah.
It's just it's awesome. I know that, I'm sure that you feel the same way about
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think that there's. I mean, I know. Maybe you felt like this in your process. For me, it's like I know when I'm trying to force something, and I'm not like kind of, surrendering, so to speak, to just letting the music let me know where it wants to go. Like I know when I'm like, no, you're going this way, you're going this way, and I can feel it happen, and I know I can listen back to something I've written, and there's no other way to explain it except for like it lets me know when it's done.
Right.
Like, and then if it's not done, I try to rework it, and there's a bunch that have just sat in a folder somewhere that they're not done, but they're not really. I don't know if I'm mature enough to find the end of it yet. I don't know. It's just we'll come back to that in a year or two. Maybe I'll be able to hear it then.
Well, it's funny because I have 3 or 4 others, that are started. And,
okay.
And, to answer the question, with did I have any extra stuff that I decided to leave out? It wasn't so much that I was going to leave it out of the project as I just kind of knew, that I just had a feeling that I liked this set of music,
Mhm.
and that this was going to work, and that I didn't want to add this other song that I probably could have put together, And I thought, well, yeah, I don't think that belongs.
Right, right, right,
It just didn't feel like it was the right time for it.
right.
You know, so there is some of that.
The
There's
oddly enough, 'cause I know you play in Steps Ahead, and
yeah,
the one that didn't fit that I had, we were gonna do Self Portrait for the Steps Ahead tune, and it just wasn't landing in the studio. We tried it again, like let's try it like this, and that tune is very much. I mean, you know the tune.
I love
That
it.
yeah, I know that tune happens one way. You like that tune just happens one way, and we tried a couple different things to see what we could get away with, and like, nah, that tune only happens one way, and I don't want to do it exactly like they did it. So let's just not. That one didn't make the cut, but I love that tune, and that's one that I was really hoping to get in there. I've always
Uh,
been really inspired by that group.
I actually did a tribute to them on the latest record.
Hmm.
And Don Grolnick wrote this amazing song called "Pools," which I'm sure
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And I was, have played that for, I mean, I played that 20 years before I ever played with Steps,
Yeah.
and and not to mention, that's one of the greatest memories for me, is when I went to audition for the band and we played Pools,
Oh,
and I
okay.
was and I was playing with Mike Brecker, and Mike was playing his solo, and he was three feet from my face
Oof.
with his tenor,
Yeah.
up there, just blazing, and it was just like, oh my, yeah, it doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah.
This is I've reached my peak, you know,
Yeah,
24 years old, and then I'm not, can't go any further than this,
yeah, yeah. Man.
and so anyway, that song has been, in my heart. I mean, it's part of me.
Hmm.
And so I wrote a song called "Ripple Effect"
Oh, cool. That's cool.
on this thing, and it's more of a tribute.
Yeah.
You'll notice that it's a similar groove and all that, but it's really just, because I just love that band so much.
Yeah.
And on the first record, I did a tribute to the Yellow Jackets, because that's
Okay.
another band that I'm just wild about.
Sure.
Always,
Sure.
so it's nice, in the creative sense, and when you have control over what you're doing, when you have total control over it, to be able to, you know, make these decisions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love this group, so I'm just going to write something for them.
Yeah.
You know, and that can so quickly inspire a melody or a rhythm or whatever. It actually makes it easier to write.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thinking in those terms.
Yeah. I want to talk about your sound, because when they sent me a copy of your record and I listened through it right out of the gate, yeah, that's the sound. Like that, you have an amazing sound.
Oh,
What
thanks.
what is your signal chain for the record? What were you going through or not going through? And then what is your signal chain live?
Signal chain in the studio directly into the board.
Okay.
You know, I've played Federa basses since 1984,
Okay.
when I started with them. And I remember Anthony Jackson was with them, Percy Jones was with them. I think Vic, had just started with them, and me,
Okay.
you know, and they had a little shop in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn,
Hmm.
on Avenue O, and it was a little tiny little place,
Yeah.
and they were just starting out. And I remember, seeing their bass at a NAMM show. I had gone around and played every other bass in the place, because I had a really nice jazz bass, but I wanted to get a 5-string. I wanted to have that low string. I heard Anthony Jackson, and that was it. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I got to get a low B. Got to have that.
Yeah.
And I was at the NAMM show, and I tried out a bunch of basses, and I was just about getting ready to leave, and I saw the Federa booth, and they had this 5 string sitting up there. And I thought, hey, should I? And then, and I was getting ready to leave, and I thought, no, I should check it out. And I went over and I asked them if I could play it. And they're like, oh, sure. Yeah, let me plug it in and sit down and play it for a few minutes. And I sat there for a half hour playing that bass right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it. That was it. That's the instrument. And, so I think that's part of it. Getting to the point of not using any processing and kind of just going straight in. For me, that's the most organic, because it is such an organic experience playing these instruments. And in fact, they basically a week later gave me that bass.
Oh, nice.
And that was the first 5-string they ever made.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they brought it to a show. I was playing with Bill Connors and Dave up at an old club that's long gone, called Micheal's. It was on the Upper West Side, and we were playing up there trio. And I told them about the gig, and they came and they brought the bass.
Oh man, it's amazing.
And I'm playing my jazz bass, and I get finished, and we're taking a break, and I went over and I talked to them for a while. They said, "Oh, we have a little something for you here," and they brought that. They said, we thought maybe you'd want to take it home and play it, and all that. And I said, man, I want to play it right now.
Yeah, finish the gig on it.
And I finished the gig on it.
That's awesome.
And everybody was just, everybody, Dave and Bill and, in the band were like, wow, that's just it. That's amazing. And it was so comfortable to play. And just the sound was just beautiful. And I took it back to him. I said, you know what? I said, the only problem with this is now I'm completely in love with this thing.
Right. And I want to.
And at some point I'm going to have to bring it back to the shop. And they said, no, you're not. You're not. It's yours.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And because they felt it too. It was just natural.
Cool.
It was just one of those things where that was it. That we fit together. And that's another long story to get to the point that with every Federa that I've ever played, I felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through probably 3 or 4 from that date, and including a couple of my own models that they do.
Yeah, you have a signature. I want to talk about that because I'm really interested in the pickup placement on your signature bass.
Yeah.
I remember when I was co-designing a bass with Dan Lakin's new company, the company's still around, but we were designing a bass together, and we talked a lot about pickup placement and a lot of that things. And go ahead and talk about your bass. And it's a Federa, and it has 2 soap bars near the bridge. That's the overview.
That's the overview, yeah. And since then, I've actually added a pickup. On mine because I wanted to kind of experiment. I'm like one of those guys, I can't leave anything alone.
Yeah, no, me too.
When I was a kid, I took my parents' stereo apart. They were really upset because, of course, I couldn't put it back together.
Right.
But hopefully, I'm a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm a little more, more mechanically inclined these days.
Yeah.
But anyway, the idea of that bass was that I wanted to have the back pickup sound, of course, but I wanted that in double coil, so that it wouldn't have grounding problems and all that. So, and it's thicker, it's fatter, and I like that sound better. It has a little bit more oomph to it. It's a fuller body sound.
Now, what was the decision between getting those 2 pickups and not putting in like just a humbucker back there with split coils, like a Music Man pickup?
Well, because I wanted to have the option. What they ended up doing is the 2 pickups, are kind of stacked like this. Yeah. When it's in Music Man mode, it's the 2 inner coils.
Right.
Okay, so it's the bottom coil of the top pickup and the top coil of the bottom pickup.
Sure.
Okay. When it goes into back pickup mode, it's with bridge pickup, then it's the 2 coils in the back pickup.
Okay.
So and then I have a little switch where I could actually, use the 2 outer coils as well.
Okay.
So that kind of gave me a little bit of almost like a squeaky jazz bass kind of sound.
Yeah.
But they're still too far back to really get that sound. So what I did later on is I added a pickup.
Okay.
Where the jazz pickup would be,
I see.
where the neck pickup would be.
Right.
So that I have that option. So basically I can get 3 identifiable sounds out of the bass.
Yeah.
And they're the classic sounds, which is, I'm kind of one of those people. I like the sound of, if I hear something on a recording, I like to play it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
If it's interesting because Lee is doing an old song of his called Captain's Fingers, and it was on one of his first albums. I think it was his second album, and it was back in the 70s. And it's obviously a precision bass.
Yeah.
And so I'm playing with the neck pickup.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to dial it in as much as I can to get it to sound exactly like that.
Sure.
And that's so fun, man. I mean, for me, because that's the tradition.
Yeah.
That's what I feel is kind of missing in a lot of the stuff these days. It feels in the digital age, bass feels so digital to me these days. And it is kind of cool to see there are some people that are going back and kind of getting into the retro thing, and I'm seeing more P basses out there, and I'm seeing more, more older kind of rigs and all that. But that's what I was trying to accomplish with this bass. And I could do, I think the reason I put the jazz pickup in the bass was more for like recordings that I would do where I wanted to get a jazz sound. I don't notice that I really use it that much live.
Okay.
I think it's more just to get that kind of sound, on recordings.
Right.
The other thing I notice, if I use the jazz sound live, it's almost muddy. It's
the neck
almost
pickup
muddy.
jazz sound.
Yeah, if I'm using the far coils, like the regular jazz, both on, both pickups on, it tends to be a little muddy for me. So that was that, and that's what I always loved about the Music Man.
Right.
Is that it was deep, but it was clean.
Yeah.
And it sounded great on stage, and you can hear every note. And that's the other reason that I elevate my amp too. I put it on my head.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Now I got into that because via Ron Carter. I knew Ron was doing it, so then I started checking it out. I'm a big fan, and I've talked to multiple amp companies. I was talking to the guys at Trickfish about man, you guys got to put a speaker stand thing in the bottom of your cab. It's the best thing, As soon as Phil Jones starts doing that, everybody will, because Phil makes these, as these small little rigs. As soon as he puts a hole in the bottom, forget about it. I know Epiphany does because of Ron. You play Mark bass, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do they come? Is Mark bass doing a speaker port, speaker stand kind of cavity in the bottom to elevate them?
No, they're not.
I think everybody should. I told the guys at Ampeg to do it. Y'all need to start doing this.
Well, that's
at least
true.
on the 112s. Don't do it on a 410, or 212. But if it's just a one speaker cab, let's get it off the ground a little.
Well, I know they're making these really lightweight cabinets now, and it's possible that they're doing that. I'm still playing the older stuff because, like I said, I'm kind of more traditional.
Yeah.
And for me, really, the story behind that is that I'd played other amps for years, with the Federa. I had the Federa, since I got the Federa so long ago, I was playing through a lot of different kinds of things. And I remember I just happened to, Stern and I were in Florida doing a gig, and we ended up doing a clinic somewhere, and they didn't have the rig that I had requested.
Okay.
They had Mark bass, and man, I plugged into that thing, and I remember I just set it flat just to start, and I thought, oh my God, this sounds like my bass. This
Yeah.
sounds like my bass, like recorded, or it sounds like the first time I played it.
Right.
Or it sounds like the bass sounds acoustically. I couldn't believe how it reproduced the bass so honestly like
Yeah.
that. And the thing I really, really appreciated about the Mark bass was the mids.
Mm-hmm.
The mid range was so clean, and it was so big.
Sure.
And it was balanced with the lows and the highs. There's always, like, it seems like,
I know.
so many amps dip.
Yeah.
And this didn't have that. It was just kind of a more flat, if not almost enhanced mid range that
Right.
really just made it really nice to play, and it felt really comfortable.
And as you spoke about your bass with all those options for all the variants within the mids, like there's a lot. Your bass is giving a lot of detail to that frequency range, so finding a cab that can communicate all the nuance of that, I'm sure, is really special.
Well, that's very, very well put, because that's exactly how I felt. And it was like, wow, these things, and I'd never heard of them, I'd never seen them, and they have these weird yellow cones. And I thought, wow, that's really something, man. And so I talked to the guy at the school about it. He said, yeah, these were, a student brought this in or something, and I got in touch with Mark Bass the next day.
Oh, cool.
And I told him, I said, listen, man, I'm so impressed with the sound of your amp with my Federa. I said, I travel a lot. I'd love to, I'd love to play through your stuff all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And we, I talked to Marco, and I talked to Ricardo, the two guys there, and were really receptive. And
cool.
It was cool. And that was back in the early days too. So,
right.
They were really helpful with me, and they hooked me up with rigs on the road, and just really sweet. It was the same kind of vibe I got with Federa. It just felt like family. It felt like these are just good people.
Yeah.
That want you to be happy ultimately.
Right.
So that was really something.
Yeah.
But I realized that when I got them on stage that I needed them to be up. But in most cases, when you're dealing with stuff on the road, they usually come in big cases. So normally what they'll do is just put the top back on the case, and put the rig on top of that. And sometimes I'll have them, like put another small case under it, so it's high enough.
Yeah.
That I can sort of get it behind my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way I can sort of at a lower volume till I can feel.
Yeah.
I can feel everything, and I can clearly hear everything.
Sure.
And and I don't have to like rock the stage to hear myself.
Yeah. You don't have the sound, developing 3 feet in front of you at your kneecaps and ankles, like down there on the floor. It's up by where you can hear it. Yeah.
The comments I get all the time is they will, before the PA system ever comes on, when we're doing sound check, I'll have time and time again, somebody will come up to me, from the production, and just say, man, that sounds so clear. I can hear every note you're playing.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Sure.
That's so important to me, because you want to, like you say, you want to hear all the nuance, and you want to hear the tone, and you want to know what pickup I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like, the timbre of the neck pickup as opposed to the bridge pickup. You want to be able to hear those differences, or if I'm blending the two, or whatever.
Yeah, because we make the decision to move our right hand up to get that tone and that feel, and you want that thing, you're going back, you're doing whatever you're doing, and you want those things to come through. So I think, having a rig that's that clear and that's all being translated is super important.
Well, and that's the other reason that I'm pretty, getting back to your question about it. What do I do, in the studio as opposed to what I do live? It's kind of the same thing. I plug into the mark bass. The mark bass is usually flat.
Okay.
Completely flat. I don't really, I might boost in a terrible room. I might boost a little highs if it's
Sure.
just, if it's cavernous. And I'm getting a lot of, if I'm getting tons of mids, or I'm getting like a really awful, like high, low frequency stuff, but not the good stuff. I have to offset,
Right.
and that's what I think tone control's on an amp are for anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're supposed to do this.
No.
I think it's more like a little tweaking here and there,
Right.
and a lot of it you could do on the bass as well. But
Sure.
I try to leave everything as flat as I can.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's the purest sound,
Yeah.
And both of those rigs, the Federa bass and the Mark bass, amp seems to be the sweet place.
Sure.
That seems to be where they sound the clearest, and otherwise there's a buildup,
Right.
that I care for.
Yeah. One of the things we want to touch on before we wrap up is your horn line phrasing.
Mhm.
Typically, I think when that's referred to with bass players, it has to deal with the intervals of playing a lot of fourths. Like most people will refer to horn line phrasing when there's fourths involved.
Interesting. Yeah.
But that's evident in your playing. I mean, that's something I've spent time working on in my playing. That kind of came to me via Jerry Bergonzi wrote a bunch of books on pentatonics. That's where I got informed on mine. Where did you kind of get some of that information? Obviously, I'm sure from a horn player. Was it from records? Was it from a book? Was it from playing with these masters that you've played with, like Michael Brecker and Randy Brecker? Where did some of those things get introduced to you, and you started kind of putting them on the bass?
Well, I got to tell you, my brother and I used to listen to every record that came out, any jazz record, and we started listening in the late '60s.
Mm-hmm.
Is when we kind of started playing, and we were big Oscar Peterson fans at that
Of
point.
course.
The trio that was I was Ray Brown, man. I used to play the bass. I was 10 years old with a pipe hanging out because I saw a picture of Ray with a pipe. And this is how how impressionable
That's
kids
amazing.
are.
Sure.
But yeah, and I was into it, and I was trying to sound exactly like him, man.
Yeah.
And I would play his stuff verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
And
probably a good thing you weren't into Mingus at that age. It would have turned out totally different, right?
well, I wasn't.
Yeah. Who knows when you would have been walking around with a gun or something.
Yeah. Tell you what, he was a big hero of mine too, and I remember Ray my brother actually played with him.
Okay.
When he came through St. Louis, and I was, at the time I was too young to go, but I wish I could have, because I never got to see him live.
Yeah,
and
I missed it right before he passed.
Yeah, I saw. But speaking of Oscar, I saw Knee Hop live in Chicago in like 1974.
Oh wow!
And oh my God, it was before people really knew about it. I mean, it's before he became the bass star that he became.
Sure.
But man, oh my God,
I can't imagine.
It was just life changing.
Yeah.
It was incredible. So remind me what the question was.
Getting a lot of those kind of non-bass player traditional lines developed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that was, I guess the point that I was trying to make is that I started out listening to, trying to listen as much to melodic bass as I could.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, because my brother and I were just basically playing trio, and I was listening to Oscar Peterson all the time. And then my dad started turning us on to Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. My dad was a jazz trumpet player when he was a kid.
Okay.
And he opened a music store. We all grew up in the music store.
Okay.
So music was a part of our life forever.
Yeah.
But he turned us on to a lot of stuff. And pretty soon Dizzy Gillespie turned into Lee Morgan, turned into Freddie Hubbard, turned into Woody Shaw, turned into Clifford Brown, and Bird was, there were just, tons of disciples after Bird, and
Sure.
and guys that he was a disciple of, like Prez, and and we listened to all that stuff. And so that was the thing. My brother was the same way as far as the way he approached piano. He approached piano as a right hand instrument, and it was more about horn lines.
Mm-hmm.
And he would, he would sit there and he'd practice Charlie Parker's lines, and he'd learn Freddie Hubbard solos, and and I don't think I was not as extensive with that, because I was thinking about other things, and I was getting into a lot of different types of things too. Like I found Earth, Wind and Fire when I was pretty young.
Oh, amazing.
And that, and Larry Graham, and there were all kinds of things I was starting to get into. But
sure.
I took all that stuff with me. I took all of those guys. So to answer the question, it was a lot about the records that we listened to when we were young. And then to top it off, he and I became kind of the go-to rhythm section in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
We were really young, and we were good, and we knew all the tunes. We could play, and we were reliable, and we had a great energy.
Sure.
So when Freddie Hubbard used to come through, he would have us come play with him.
Oh, amazing.
Or James Moody, or Barney Kessel, or we played with Sonny Stitt. We played with Dizzy a few times. Ray played with Dizzy when he was 14.
Man.
Went up and jammed with Dizzy. And the next time Dizzy came into town, he called Ray and said, "Hey, you coming up to the club? Come on up, play Night in Tunisia with us." And so we got to be known as the guys, around there that you could rely on,
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie Harris used to come through. I used to play with Eddie Harris all the time. He'd come into town like every 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And he'd always call me,
That's great.
And intimidating guy, man, but he was, boy, he could play, and he was really nice to me.
Yeah. That's cool.
And Moody used to come through a lot too. And he actually took us to Chicago a couple of times to play. And man, it was a great experience. But that's the thing, when you're playing with those guys live, that's when it really seeps in.
Sure.
Because you not only hear the notes, but you see the sweat, you see the energy, you see the body language, you see, rhythmically where they're coming from, and you can see it, you can read it on them,
Yeah, and how old were you roughly around this time when
I was
you're playing with Stitt and Moody and all these guys?
17, 18.
And you weren't just freaked out? Like, had you had an understanding of who Sonny Stitt was? I mean, I'm focusing on Sonny Stitt because, like, Sonny Stitt to me is one of the untouchables. Like, Stitt is, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, you weren't just like freaked out, like, oh my gosh, that's Sonny Stitt. Like, oh, what's he gonna think? Like, you weren't inside your own head, or just you could show up and be confident in your playing at 17.
Well, it's funny because it's this cockiness that kids have.
Sure.
There's a certain amount of that which I think is good. I think too much of it is not good, because I think then it gets in your way.
Yeah.
But I think in the point for me was that I felt that I was good enough.
Okay.
I didn't think that I was the best player on the planet, but I knew that I could play with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew if they called any tempo, I could handle the tempo.
Okay.
I knew if they called most any song, I would know it,
Mm-hmm.
especially because we did listen to them so much as kids.
Yeah.
All the guys that we were playing with were guys that we had previously bought all their records and listened to them. So,
Right.
I kind of knew what to expect, but man, what a difference between, that I think that was the point, is what the huge difference between hearing Freddie Hubbard play on a record and him standing in front of you play.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, man, I have to say that he was the guy that didn't need anybody else on the bandstand. I mean, he had everything.
Yeah.
The guy had time, he had feel, he had the harmonic thing sewn up, everything that he played, you could totally hear the harmony. And you
Right.
could hear when he would play substitutions.
Sure.
When you go a different way, you could hear it was so clear with him.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorites as far as being able to play with live, because he was just the inventiveness was just crazy, and he was in such control.
Right.
It's just crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the best time. I mean, I just got to get past that. Just made such a huge impression on me.
Of course.
Of course. And I think that was the guy that was probably the most intimidating for me too. Because I think because of those reasons, because
Right.
it was just, how do you do that, man? How do you have such crazy control, all the time? And how do you play such perfect things all the time? It's just amazing.
What kind of feedback? Excuse me. I mean, you mentioned that they were calling you regularly when they were coming through town, but were they giving you feedback? Like, sound good, kid. Check this out, or sound good, kid, but don't do this, or like, what kind of little insights were they distilling?
Nothing.
Really?
Not really anything. No, because
I think that's even better a little bit. Just they're letting you experience and learn from just what it is.
Well, I remember Stitt when the first time I played with him, he counted off something really fast, and I know why he did it, and he did it in a weird key.
Yeah, kind of
and
check you out.
We were going to sink or swim.
Yeah.
I remember when we started and he started playing his solo, we were playing behind him. He kind of looked over and he smiled and he put his head up like that.
Yeah.
He started playing, and that was the only thing I think that anyone ever did that was remotely like kind of giving you, the feeling of acceptance. Or It was old school, man.
Yeah.
Like those guys, man, they all had been through it, know?
Yeah.
And I think it was just that. I think things would have been said if we weren't handling our gig.
Sure.
I think that, or we just wouldn't have.
Yeah, you wouldn't have got the call. Yeah.
Yeah, we wouldn't have come the next night.
Right. Exactly.
Something would have happened,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't be there the following night, but for me, that's man, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's an amazing experience.
Because that really is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It's either you do the gig or you don't. And that's the real, when you could, that's the proving ground right there.
Right.
That's the thing that makes it or breaks it.
Yeah.
And I just I've always appreciated that.
Sure.
And I get that sensibility totally.
Yeah. Yeah. You got tour dates coming up with Lee Ritenour. When do they start? And is it local? Local meaning America, or are you going overseas?
It's all East Coast.
Okay.
We're just doing a thing for 2 weeks. And one of the shows we're doing, Dave Grusin will be there.
Okay.
Which is really fun. We did a thing with him at NJ Pack about 2 months ago. It was a tribute to Dave. And
cool.
I was lucky enough to get called, and Dave Weckl was on it, Patty Austin.
Oh, great.
New York Voices. There were just Jane Monheit was there. It was really an amazing show for Dave.
Nice.
And I've been blessed, in getting called for several of those things. I remember I did one at Disney Hall with him, and we did the West Side Story stuff. And so that's always a thrill. And Dave and Lee are just the two of the sweetest people I've ever met.
Cool.
And two of the most inspiring people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And anytime I get the call from Lee, it's like you just make it work, because
right.
You got to do that. That's just one of those experiences,
Yeah.
And it's going to be fun. George Whitty's playing keyboard, and he and I have known each other for years and never played together.
Oh, okay.
So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And but it's just going to be 2 weeks, up and down the coast. And we're actually doing 3 nights in New York. We'll be at the Iridium for 3 nights.
Okay.
And then we're ending the thing at Jazz Alley in DC.
Okay.
Which is one of my favorite places. I love the club. So it's just going to be a ball. And then Dave and I are going to be doing our band in the fall.
Okay.
In Europe, we're doing October, November in Europe. And we do that every year. And we may, we're talking about trying to do an East Coast or maybe a West Coast tour as well.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, man, I'm just at home, like trying to write and trying to create stuff, because I'm so into it now.
Cool. Any future plans of taking the music from this album on the road?
Well, that's what Dave and I are doing.
Oh, that's that project. Okay.
The band that we call it the Dave Michael Tom Kennedy Project.
Okay.
And it's all this music.
Okay.
It's all this music. We were mixing the first record, Stories,
mm-hmm.
and the first of the series, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
And Dave kind of stopped the playback, and he said, "No, man, we ought to take this music out.
Yeah.
We should. Why don't we do like a co-led band, and we'll play this music?"
Cool. Very
and
cool.
I said, "I'd love to, man.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can get."
Yeah.
And we started calling, and we got in touch with our people in Europe, and we were getting a good reception from it.
Cool, man.
Starting a gig, so we did a couple of tours over there, and then we've done a couple of West Coast tours here. We have not done the East Coast yet, so I'm really wanting to do that.
Yeah.
And play this music in my town, man.
Yeah, I know. Your own backyard.
In New York.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's just been great. It's to play the stuff. It's one thing to record the stuff and to have the albums, but it's another thing altogether to get the audience response.
Sure.
And it's been really great, and they really love the band, and they really like the music, and it's dynamic, and I think they really enjoy it. I'm just so honored.
Cool, man. That's great. Congratulations. The album comes out today. It comes out today.
Yeah.
Right? Comes out before the podcast. This podcast won't be out for a little while, but the record does drop today, March 22nd, on all streaming platforms, or by the time everybody's listening to this, it will be out. New start. Now, it is just billed under your name. The record is just Tom Kennedy, but it's a co-led project with you and Dave Weckl.
No, it's these are all my projects. These are
your projects.
Original music projects.
Okay.
And Dave and I are touring the music.
Okay.
But
I see.
Dave played on everything.
Yeah.
He's on both records, and he just really dug I was just so honored, because he really dug the music enough to want to put a band together and play this music.
That's cool.
And he's really honoring the music, and coming from someone that I'm that close to, that he's a brother to me.
Sure.
And it's just, it's a very emotional thing, and I'm just really honored,
That's cool.
And it's been so much fun.
That's awesome.
Just having fun.
Man, fantastic. Tom, thanks so much for being on, man.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Man, pleasure. Man, anytime you got some new news, you got a new record, anything, let me know. Come back on. Let's chat about it.
I'd love it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Yo, yo. Yo, this is Craig Gash. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the Instagram, the YouTube. Leave us a comment.
Alrighty-o. That was my talk. That was my talk with Tom Kennedy. Again, his new recording is titled New Start. Highly recommend checking that out. Visit TomKennedyMusic.com for more information about the album and his previously released recordings. All right, folks. That pretty much does it. For this one. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one in a minute.